Hi, folks. Welcome. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself and where you're calling in from. We'd love to see where folks are coming from, and if you want to include um, where you work or what your connection is and why you're interested in joining today. All right, so it is 1:05, so we're gonna get started. My name is Lauren. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Director of Education at the
Can
Canadian
you
Center.
close my door?
Oh,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
oh, good. Yeah, so sorry. I'm the Director of Education at the Canadian Center for Women's Empowerment, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. So I just wanted to provide a brief agenda before we get started. So we'll just start with a welcome, a land acknowledgement, a brief content warning, and then a note on language. And then I'll move into introducing our wonderful speakers today. And then we'll have a panel discussion with our four speakers. And then we'll move into some time to answer any questions you folks may have. We do just ask you use the Q&A function on Zoom to submit your questions to just make sure we address them. We might not have time to answer every question, but we'll do our best. So we just want to recognize that the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. So for thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so today. So, as a grassroots organization, we commit to dismantling barriers to economic resources, especially for Indigenous communities facing abuse. Acknowledging colonialism's ongoing impact, we pledge to work alongside Indigenous peoples, following their lead to restore justice and build a better future. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, we give our respect to its first inhabitants. And so I did want to just also provide a brief content warning before we start today. So we will be discussing topics related to gender-based violence, economic abuse, and fraud. So we recognize that these topics might be difficult to hear and discuss. So we do ask that you prioritize your well-being. You're welcome to step away or leave at any moment. Um, we have included some resources on the slide, and then my colleague Narita will be sharing a link in the chat, which will bring you to one of our web pages that has support resources across Canada. I also too just wanted to provide a note on language. So we want to acknowledge that there's no single or universally adequate language that describes people's lived experiences. People who have experienced economic abuse may use different terms to describe themselves and their experiences. That may include survivor, victim, or other language that reflects their own understanding and agency. So at CCFWE, we respect self-identification and recognize that language around gender-based violence, like its experience itself, is not fixed or uniform. So you may be hearing the term survivor and victim used today. And I also just wanted to provide a brief introduction to who the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment is. So, we're the only organization in Canada focused solely on addressing all forms of economic abuse. So, that includes financial control, economic exploitation, and education and employment sabotage. So, we work nationally to drive policy change, provide survivor-led support, and push for systemic transformation, especially for women in equity-deserving communities. Our mission is to build a survivor-informed, culturally appropriate, and right-based support system, one that leads to safety, dignity, and financial independence for all. So now I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. So Rhiannon is the project manager for Women's Shelters Technology Safety Canada project. Through her project addressing technology facilitated gender based violence, Rhiannon has been developing practical technology safety resources and training for Canadian anti violence workers that addresses how technology can be used to both keep survivors safe and misused by perpetrators to commit crimes of domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, impersonation, and harassment. Rhiannon was selected as the member of the official Canadian delegation to the 67th United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, where she represented Tech Safety Canada. Julie is Equifax Canada's head of consumer advocacy and compliance and a self-described credit score dork. She is known for decoding complex credit topics with humor and analogies, focusing on the fair treatment of consumers while representing their voice to regulators and the media. As a go-to media expert, Julie has appeared live on BNN Bloomberg, CP24, and Global TV, and provided commentary for a multitude of additional outlets. Julie participates in a number of panels and committees, including the Consumer Protection Advisory Committee of the FCAC, the Consumer Advisory Panel of the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, and she is also a member of CCFWE's Task Force for Economic Justice on the Finance and Banking Services Committee. Messi is the executive director and founder of the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment. Messi is a social entrepreneur, a multi-award winning economic security and justice futurist, and the first Canadian to bring economic abuse into public policy discourse at the national um, level. She's also the co-founder of the International Coalition Against Economic Abuse. Her 24 plus years of work have shaped legislation, federal budgets, and systemic reform across Canada and internationally, including contributing to the federal budget of 2025 and Canada's first national code of conduct for financial institutions addressing economic abuse. She has testified before Parliament, the Senate, the House of Commons, and provincial legislators and presented at the UN, World Bank, EU, IMF. Recognized with more than 25 awards, including the 2025 Governor General's Award, Google Canada's Entrepreneur Award, and featured in forums. She's widely known for translating complex structural challenges into clear decision-ready insights and is the founder for Canada's National Economic Abuse Awareness Day, which has now been expanded to the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Lynn is a proud mom and member of Treaty 9 with Dokas First Nation. She has a degree in criminal justice with a minor in Native Studies from Nipissing University and has been with the Ontario Provincial Police for over 19 years. Lynn has worked in various frontline positions, including intelligence, major crimes, hate crimes, and in liaison for victim services. Lynn had the opportunity to lead the OPP's new award-winning unit, the Cyber-Enabled Fraud Team, and she's been working with the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre under the OPP's Anti-Rackets bracket since 2015 and is currently an acting detective staff sergeant. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. So now we're just going to move into our panel discussion. So the first question I'm going to ask our speakers is what types of fraudulent activities related to economic abuse has your organization encountered?
I can go if if that's okay to start off with
For
folks.
sure. Thanks,
Yeah,
Rhiannon.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so at Women's Shelters Canada, we actually just completed a project not too long ago on digital financial abuse, where women's shelters and transition houses across the country shared a wide range of economic abuse examples. Um, the sir, sorry, so. I guess what I want to say is that, in terms of this is all in terms of fraud, and a lot of it involves identity misuse. So, for example, shelter workers were supporting survivors whose partners applied for government benefits under their names. So, one big example is, during the COVID-19 crisis with CERB, um, the abusive partner would fill out or apply for those government benefits and then had that money deposit into their own accounts, leaving the survivors responsible for paying back the loans or dealing with the tax consequences. We also see things like credit cards or loans or other accounts opened under survivors' names without their knowledge, leaving them enforce debt. In some cases, if the abusive partner owns a business, they may underreport income and the survivor ends up being held responsible for taxes or other financial liabilities. So, for us, we found that even after a relationship ends, the financial impact and control of an abusive partner's fraudulent activities continue to be really painful and harmful for survivors that continue for years after.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Um, yeah, did any folks else want to add?
Sure, I can add.
Thanks, Lynn.
Mine is more, I guess, global. It's not necessarily, what's happening at the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, but what we're seeing since we are basically the fraud reporting center for Canada. We are seeing, frauds all over, but identity fraud is actually the number one reported fraud in Canada. And when it comes to dollar losses, it's a little lower, and we don't really account dollar losses to ID fraud because technically it's not always the victim or it's harder to quantify. But identity fraud leads, or theft as well, leads to most of the other frauds that we see. And when someone is victimized and especially their information is taken in any way, like we heard with like the CERB benefits, taxes, but it also goes into your credit. It is sometimes years to get all your information back and right on track. We are seeing a lot of different phishing, fraudulent accounts being created. We're seeing also fake information. So part of someone's ID with part of someone else's ID being created, and it's a brand new person, but then there might be some things linked to one person and other things linked to another. It becomes convoluted, but a lot of things can be, we're seeing a lot of that.
Thanks, Lynn. Messi or Julie, did you want to add anything?
Messi, please go ahead. I have some comments to add as we move into the other questions, but I don't think I can match the excellent examples already given.
Okay.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this panel, and thank you so much for all attendee for this very important conversation. From our day-to-day work, especially as a survivor and advocate as well for this work, what I see is fraud. People experience fraud in two sides. Sometimes it's maybe when you are in a relationship, or sometimes also, after separation and, divorce. So sometimes even abuse their partner, as you mentioned, they use their name, their identity, their bank account, or credit without permission. That's still fraud. And of course, sometimes also survivors, they were pressured to sign, papers like, to take a loan, open credit card, and, carrying also dates which they don't even feel to choose. So We have seen cases, of course, to date. I remember one of our financial empowerment program shows that 54% of victims of gender-based violence experience also course to date. Identity misuse, as you mentioned, unauthorized banking transaction, hidden money, as said, and as I mentioned also, forced signing of financial documents, especially when there is business involved. It's very tricky for survivors even to flag even financial institutions. So the impact is very deep, especially survivor may left with damaged credits, housing problem, as you know, employment is also another issue, especially the fear is so, huge for many people. So this is really, really very hard. That's why we're also creating this conversation and making sure that also everyone is understanding. So yeah, this is kind of the thing what we have seen. But of course, we knew that now with this AI revolution, uh, as someone who also cares about technology, we knew that also AI is also may have some concern. And of course, technology also can misuse, as you know, and still some survivors also, especially after they leave their relationship from our experience, they receive a fake email, fake, voice message with, manipulating technology and email from a fake from, it seems like from lawyer, usually some abusers, they do that. So as you know, most women they don't have proper digital literacy, so that also create a fear, a chaotic, and it affect also mental health. So for survivors, that really, really increase fear in any ways, confusion, isolation, and control. So we believe that this is part of the solution, but still we are, navigating the system. But what we have seen so far is the financial harm, the financial crime and exploitation is a huge part of this fraud.
Thanks, Messi. All right, so we'll move on to the next question. How have you seen AI come up in cases of fraud and economic abuse?
I can start. So we know that AI is being used in all different capacities by perpetrators of fraud. We're seeing it in the phishing and the social engineering. So, like in the background of the fraud. So anybody can go online and for maybe $200, you can buy a kit and it will create a fraud for you that you can then send en masse. And they will use AI. There are versions of ChatGPT that will walk you through how to do a fraud and will actually give you examples of scripts of what to say. If a person says this, you say that. Fraudsters even are using AI, or anybody can use AI to facilitate a fraud. Also, AI is being used to create those accounts like I was talking about previously, like create fake accounts or scrape information that might be on the internet, whether because an ex-partner has or an abuser has put it out there, or that you were involved in a data breach or something, right? So information sometimes is pretty easy to find. Also, we see a lot of deep fake. So there will be deep fake technology, fake videos, fake voices, but made to look like or made to sound like, whether that is a public official or whether that is, someone like you and me. So very aware that those technologies are out there and very accessible to people.
Thanks, Lynn. Anyone else want to add?
I can speak a little bit to it specifically within intimate partner violence. So the most common ways that we're seeing AI show up as a tool for economic abuse is really through the fabricating and manipulation of evidence. So I think Messi kind of touched on this earlier, but this looks like, creation of fake messages, altering financial documents or content that makes it appear like a survivor said or did something that they didn't, or make them appear that they may have more money than they actually do. This is especially concerning in civil court where many survivors are self-representing. So they may already be trying to sort of, piece together financial records on their own. And now they're also, being questioned or having to testify about, what's real. Versus, what may have been manipulated. So this just adds another layer of complexity and can really be used to undermine credibility and create confusion. So, for us, AI is not just a tool survivors might be using, but it's also a tool that's being used against them.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Julie or Messi, do you have anything else to add around that?
I'll just hop in on building on what Rhiannon was saying. I love your use of the term credibility because that is one of the major uses that we tend to see of AI, where on one hand, it's being used fraudulently in order to try to establish fraudulent credibility, which sounds a bit like two words that shouldn't go together. And on the other hand, AI is being used to help detect this kind of fraudulent use. So as the AI itself, as that technology is evolving, which we certainly all know is happening at a very rapid pace, so is the technology that's being used on the other side in order to try to authenticate and look for evidence and markers that a submitted document, for example, does look like it is accurate and credible, as opposed to something that somebody has had artificial program create or that they themselves have tried to piece together.
Great, thank you. Messi?
Yeah, so for me, I see AI is creating a new and dangerous angle, especially on fighting economic abuse and financial abuse. In the past, abuse often, it was face to face through controlling of your money but now AI allows abuse even to happen digitally wherever you are, and distance, it doesn't even matter. Still, you are in control. We know that even economic abuse stays for so long after women they leave abusive relationships. So when AI is involved, it's really very hard for women who experience this form of violence even to live and to continue their life. So we know that AI is creating. We already discussed about this fake bank account. That's what I see also personally with many survivors, and false message, for electronic signatures, and also pressuring even sometimes, sending for someone. Password is also another issue, especially when survivor leaves abusive relationship. They want to keep all their password, but we have seen also some survivors, they told us their password is already stolen because of technology. So this created, as you mentioned, a confusion and fear. Fear is the worst pain for survivors, and survivors need freedom. It's all about dignity. So that's what I see. So this means abusive partner will have again a system that continue to control, but we know that also AI is also help to flag and to detect financial and economic abuse. So I know we'll talk about the advantage part, but what I see is still there's interconnected, and we know that technology is also harming, survivors of gender-based violence, especially those who are marginalized, those who don't have even digital literacy skills.
Great, thanks everyone. So our next question, or what are some myths or misconceptions around AI that you've come across?
I can start again. So to continue what I had said before, that we are aware of video and audio, AI technology out there. There seems to be a myth that some of the popular frauds that we're seeing right now, where someone's pretending to be the grandson, sometimes it's called grandparent fraud or emergency fraud, where you think it's a family member that's calling and it's heightened, something's going on, they're super upset and they're asking for money or information or whatever it is. And some people are saying, yeah, like the voice of my said grandchild or whoever they think the family member was cloned. And there is no evidence of that we've seen in our investigations. But the technology does exist, but these frauds are kind of en masse. Can it be used in a targeted event, like let's say in an abusive relationship? For sure, those apps are on there, and it's very easy to use. But that is one misconception that I want to kind of straighten out, is that we haven't seen it happen in some of those more en masse frauds.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Any folks have any other additions for that?
Maybe I can say some few words. So, in terms of the misconception, you know, I'm not a tech person, but I'm a tech savvy, and also I advocate for AI adoption date in Canada for May 6th. And in the meantime, also I see how it harms. And but the huge misconception from my, engagement is AI is harming only the big companies. But the reality is people, especially survivors, people lives in poverty, they are also targeted. So AI risk is not for companies as well. I think that's what I learned. And then, of course, there is also AI is only of cyber issues, not AI is all about the safety issues. It's a consumer issues and it's also gender-based violence issue. I think this has a huge misunderstanding especially in the corporate sector. I have seen this kind of conversation. So I feel like the ethics part is a huge part of this work. I knew that. When AI grows, public awareness and protection must be grow. That's what we'll continue advocating. But again, the marginalized people are highly impacted in many ways, not only knowledge, but also the mindset, the accessibilities, the inclusion as well. A lot of people who look like us, they are not included in AI conversation these days. So that also affecting them. So that creates also another misconception.
Great. Thanks, Messi. Any other thoughts?
I can just add one that we see from the credit bureau perspective. So, quick reminder, two major credit bureaus in Canada. One of them is the one I work for, Equifax. The other one is called TransUnion. And many creditors, so banks, lenders, credit card issuers, send data on a monthly basis to both credit bureaus. And that's how your credit report gets created and updated. And so, in the case of something like an identity theft situation, where someone looks at their credit report and they see that there's an account on here with a bank they've never dealt with, we will often hear from that person say, like, there's this obvious fraud. I've never dealt with this bank, so you need to remove it from my credit report. And we absolutely want credit reports to be as accurate as possible. And we have a number of procedures in place in order to help that happen. But one thing that surprises a lot of people is, especially when it's somebody who it doesn't occur to them that many people are doing fraudulent things of all kinds of different flavors. So they're expecting a response of like, oh, sorry about that. We'll get that removed right away. When what actually has to happen, a credit bureau like Equifax or TransUnion, we're not allowed to change data on someone's credit report when it came from, say, a bank or a lender without verifying it with that bank or lender. And then they need to do usually a fraud investigation in order to determine what has actually happened in the case. And then eventually the credit report will get updated when that information is confirmed by the lender. So just positioning that as a bit of a myth or misunderstanding when people are expecting a kind of immediate, like, oh, yep, we'll get that fixed right away. We absolutely want to get everything updated as quickly as possible. But some of, especially fraud investigations, they can take time. So that's an important thing for people to be aware of.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Okay. Rhiannon, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just bring it back because I mean, the context of the work that we do is a little bit different, but what we're seeing in our work is one of the common misconceptions, and I think that everybody else has touched on this already, is that AI is always accurate and re reliable. We're seeing that survivors are starting to turn to AI tools for advice, often because GBV services are stretched, there are wait lists. And so they turn to AI for immediate answers. And I think that that makes sense in the context of anti-violence programming. But the challenge is that AI tools are designed to sound confident and supportive even when they're wrong, right? And so survivors may come into support services or, um, I guess support services in general, feeling really certain that what they've been told is correct, even when it's not. And so this can be really difficult for support workers who are then trying to gently unpack that information and provide accurate guidance for folks, especially within like the legal realm, right? And so it really highlights that gap, what that we're trying to fill at WSC, which is, that survivors need that timely, trustworthy support. And right now, AI is sometimes stepping into those spaces in ways that aren't always safe or reliable, especially when it comes to a financial advice. So I wanted to just plug that.
Great. Thanks, folks. So we'll move into the next question. What steps should someone take if they're concerned that fraudulent activity involving their personal finances has occurred?
All right, on theme, I'll start. Um, I mean, a lot. There's a lot of things depending. It pretty much is depending on the type of fraud or what it involves. But I will go through, I guess, generally, and I will say I'm going to do a selfless plug here, but all of these steps with the proper contacts can be found at the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre's website. So if anybody wants to reference it, obviously, first of all, try to gather or document anything that you're aware of to figure out, okay, it's my ID, maybe my tax account, my bank account, figuring out maybe how it happened, which you might never know. And then contact the institutions that are affected. So if it is your bank account, let them know. If it is with your taxes, let the government know. And most importantly, I would say both credit bureaus, as has already been mentioned, doing or asking for a credit report from both will really show what has been taken out in your name for identity fraud, and that's where you can start the disputes, as was previously explained. If you are a victim, and that is whether or not you have lost money or that it has affected your identity, I do recommend to call local police if you wish, for an investigation or to have it reported, especially if your identity is being used elsewhere. It is important to have it flagged, whether there is an investigation or not. Um, and also from there are other government agencies, right? If it's your driver's license or maybe your mail is being redirected, there are so many things. But depending on your fraud, a lot of this is all itemized with your passport, who to contact, your social insurance number, who to contact, government documents, and so forth. So I think the biggest thing is, if it has occurred, take a pause, try to get the information and who you need to contact. It is really time consuming, unfortunately. And when someone's already vulnerable or has already been through something traumatic, and then to have this, it is a lot. So I do recommend, if you can get help with that, whether a friend or some other resources to help you go through that, it can help.
I can build on that. Thanks, Lynn. That was a really good start. So when it comes to the credit bureaus, again, Equifax and TransUnion, and you do need to talk to them both, the involvement of your credit report and potential impacts on credit scores and so on, when it comes to fraud, there are a couple of paths that this could happen. So there's somebody who's unauthorized using your credit card, for example. So you're getting charges on your credit card that you didn't initiate. That type of information isn't on a credit report. It's just the balance each month and other account details that are updated typically on a monthly basis. So for something like that, or an unauthorized withdrawal from your checking account, those are things where you want to go straight to the bank or the institution that was involved. Um, and so that's where it's unauthorized withdrawal of legitimate accounts. So now we'll switch over to what I might call illegitimate or fake accounts. So these are ones where true identity theft has occurred. Someone has opened a new credit account in your name and you don't even know about it. So some of the examples that we see with this kind of thing, it could be a new credit card. Sometimes what people are able to do is convince the bank or the credit card issuer that, so maybe they've made a fake driver's license with their photo, but your information on it. So as they're applying for this account and the ID is being checked, they are saying, oh, I just moved last week. So the address there that's on my driver's license isn't correct because I haven't had a chance to update it yet. Say they're successful convincing that institution. So this new credit card gets opened in your name and it's mailed directly to that person, not to you. So this could exist for quite some time before you would even become aware of it. Now, I know this is a very scary scenario that I'm describing, and I do want to let you know that banks and credit card issuers have a lot of checks and balances and safeguards in place to try to catch this type of thing happening. So this isn't an everyday somebody gets their credit card, a new credit card opened in their name that they're not aware of, but it is a possibility and important to be aware of. So in that situation, now you've got information on your credit reports that isn't truly yours. So this is a credit card. It could have been a car loan, a line of credit. So that's where, one, you want to make sure you're looking at both of your credit reports, which you can get for free directly from Equifax and TransUnion. So that's a free thing that you can do. Just make sure that you recognize all of those accounts. If you don't recognize one or more of the accounts, that's when you want to contact the credit bureaus and also whoever issued that account. If it's a bank, you want to contact that particular bank and let them know this isn't mine. You need to start a fraud investigation. And then those steps I was talking about earlier kick in, where it's going to go to their fraud department and they have a number of things they'll do in order to track and try to figure out what has happened. There are free things that anybody can do to help protect themselves from this happening, or if it has happened, to help prevent it from recurring. So one is that anybody in Canada can put it's goes by a few different terms depending on the province. Sometimes it's a fraud warning, sometimes it's an identity alert. That is a statement that goes on your credit report that contains your cell phone number. And it says, if anyone is applying for credit in my name, I need to be called at this number to verify the identity. And so hopefully what happens is you're in, well, I was going to say hopefully you're in Home Depot because your fridge just stopped working and you need a new appliance, but that's not a happy scenario. But let's say that is the scenario. And so you want to use one of their payment plans. And so that involves a credit check. And so they get your permission. Can we check your credit? Hopefully then you get a phone call standing right there where they say like, okay, I just need to verify. And you're like, yeah, hey, I'm the one who answered the phone. But the scary scenario is you get that phone call when you're sitting at home and just verifying that you're trying to apply for credit at Home Depot right now. No, I am not. Please do not proceed with that transaction. So you do not have to have been a victim of identity theft in order to be able to put that statement on your credit report for free. And that is for anybody across Canada. So just want to make sure everyone is aware of that like tool that's available to anyone.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Rhiannon or Messi, do you have anything to add about that? Fair. Okay. Our next question are what are some steps that anyone can take to help protect themselves from fraudulent activity related to their personal finances?
Maybe I'll start us off there again, since I was just clearly running my mouth on similar topics. So I talked about those free identity alert, fraud warning type of statements that can go on your credit report. And again, you need to contact both bureaus individually. So one communication with Equifax, one with TransUnion. There is a newer protection that has been coming into Canada that is based on the province that you live in. So this is the concept called a credit freeze or a credit lock. It's currently only available in Quebec. And as of July of this year, so in a couple months, it will be available to residents of Ontario as well. The reason it's not available across the country is that there are some complexities around legislation that needs to be put in place by provincial governments in order to allow this type of thing to happen in their province. So let me explain what this is. So sometimes you see it referred to as a credit freeze, sometimes it's called a credit lock, but they're basically the same thing. So what you do is you can put your credit report in a locked or frozen status. And what that means is that if any request for your credit report comes into that credit bureau where you have frozen or locked it, so once again, you need to do it individually at both Equifax and TransUnion to have all your bases covered. So let's say your credit report is locked, a request comes in because maybe you forget that you locked it. So you're applying for a new credit card. That request comes in, it is going to be rejected, and the credit report is not shared with the organization that made the request for it. And they get a message that says, this report is currently locked. It cannot be shared with you for this purpose. And an important thing to understand is that that does not prevent anybody from accessing your credit report. It only prevents access to your credit report in a credit application type of situation. And that could include like an existing credit card or line of credit where you might be looking to get your limit increased. So maybe you've got a $2,000 limit on a credit card and you're talking to the bank asking, can I get that bumped up to 4,000? Sometimes that will involve a credit check, and that kind of thing would be rejected by the credit bureau. So that is what exists today in Quebec and coming soon in Ontario. But I also want to talk about what it doesn't do. So if somebody has been in an economic abuse situation and the former partner or abuser, let's say that they know that person's username and password for things like online banking and free access to your credit report. So they might log on directly to Equifax and they're impersonating you. They know your username and password. They're typing that in. They are going to be able to see that credit report because as far as the system is concerned, you have been properly authenticated because the correct username and password were provided. And one of the particularly important areas to be aware of is that sometimes that is how abusers will track new contact information for the survivor. So if somebody has emerged from an abusive situation and they're now starting to get a new cell phone number, they've got a new address. When they notify their bank or existing credit card issuers or other issuers of credit, that information might get sent to the credit bureaus and updated on that person's credit report. So if there is a former abuser, a former partner, what have you, who is able to impersonate that person, they may be able to then access the new information, the new phone number, the new address, even if the credit report is locked. Because when it looks like it's the person themselves just doing a check, which everybody in Canada has the right to do, I'm just checking to make sure I recognize all the accounts here. That is not an access reason that would be prevented by a lock or freeze in place. So what's the protection here? Update passwords. That is such a critical thing. And I mean, we all know this generally for just existing as a human. We need complex passwords. We need to update them relatively frequently. And I'm sure Lynn has lots of other recommendations for us, but those are really important things to do in order to prevent this kind of inadvertent and fraudulent access of the new information as the survivor is looking to rebuild and move away from that previous situation.
Thanks, Julie. Lynn, do you want to add?
Sure. I mean, all of that. Also, just I guess generally checking that your emails and that your courier, your normal snail mail, is not being redirected. That you're getting what you're expecting. A lot of information still gets lost, and a lot of us will use our email or our inbox as almost a filing, and it has a lot of. If you think of what comes through our emails, a lot of personal information. And I know that especially in my past job dealing more with survivors, a lot of their partners did have access to their computer, to their phones, to their accounts, even email, social media. So yes, again, it goes back to changing your passwords, but also enable your two-factor authentication for all of these. And look, especially for social media and things like that, it is important to go look at their updates for security, because they update their security fairly like on a regular basis. And what they do sometimes, it resets it to the the baseline standard security settings. So sometimes you have to go back in and re-enable some of the security things, especially for social media. Check the source. If you get something that seems weird, call out of the blue, a text or an email or anything that's asking for personal information or to confirm a password, look at the source, take a second. Nothing is an emergency when it comes to these things. And then also the unsolicited information or the looking for that. The government especially will never send money through an email or a text. Click the link and you'll get your benefits or your tax return. So I know that sometimes we're not in the right headspace and then we fall for other things. So those are just things to be aware of.
Great, thanks, Lynn. Messi or Rhiannon, did you have anything to add for like the survivor context specific? I know both Lynn and Julie touched on that.
Yeah, sure. Actually, we already developed a six-step survivor checklist, I think 2, 3 years ago for our victims. We have a standard practice for survivors if they want to live a abusive relationship, which is very important. You can check it. I know Neridashi can put it in the chat. So we always encourage survivors to check their bank account and credit card and credit report, especially when there is unusual activity. Not only that, before even they leave any abusive relationship, because early action is one of the best protection. And of course, the two-factor authentication, that would be great. But for some survivors, still we have a concern, especially when they have, like, one phone number which is attached to, on one of the bank accounts, especially in intimate partner relationship. Abusers, they don't allow them to detangle those authentication phone number. Some survivors still, they struggle to access even their bank account, even CRA account. That's our encounter for the past, but we still encourage them to follow the strict guidelines and then educate themselves on how they could even set up the two-factor authentication, because if you don't remove it, it's really, hard for survivors. Sometimes the authentication goes to the abuser phone number. And then, of course, there may be a lot of email and text message sometimes. It seems from our lawyers, social workers, from our mental health therapists, but there is also sometimes people, maybe family members, especially immigrant. As you know, when we came to this country, we are responsible to send money back. We use a lot of remittance, Western Union, Wise. There's a number of apps we are using. So we need to be very careful. And we need to also making sure that all the financial, transactions are recorded. And then the other thing is always verify requests directly to the bank or service provider, and making sure that, you have, official contact, which is very important. We also encourage to set alert, especially for account withdrawal and transfer, password change as well. That's very important. So from, intimate partner violence, abusive perspective, I want to also highlight that fraud again happen inside in the relationship, especially when there is coercion and pressure. Again, abusers, they usually use survivors, identity for number of reasons, sometimes to take store credit card, or sometimes also to take also loan on behalf of them. So if someone control your money and, force a date and accessing also your account without your consent, this is a serious concern. So for the victims, please know that don't blame yourself. That's the most important thing. Fraud, scams, coerced date, it happens, but there is always someone you always try to reach out. I know the Canadian Center for Fraud Prevention, even there's also organization they can assist you on coerced, data and, financial crime information. So it's also, good to talk about banks. I know our financial institution is not reachable because of the bureaucracy, and it's really hard for survivors to reach out and to contact the bank. And hopefully once the code of conduct introduced, that makes survivors' life easy. But it's good to document. Documentation is very important. And then also we always encourage to seek support, because that's also very, important. So financial safety in technology is very, very personal and, connected, especially with survivors' life. So I would like to put, the 6-step checklist for domestic abuse survivors, which is very important. It's also reflected in our mobile app for anyone who right now, experience domestic abuse. We encourage to have a financial safety planning before we leave abusive relationship, because this is the most critical step and the most dangerous step for survivors, either to harm financially or physically. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Great. Thanks, Messi. I think we have time for one more question for panel before we head over to the participant questions. And I see that Rhiannon also just shared a link to a toolkit from Tech Safety. Did you want to speak to that, Rhiannon?
Oh, I just wanted to, I mean, everybody else has some really great tips. I just wanted to add that
Yeah.
our digital financial abuse toolkit is available in both French and English. So we just put the link there in the chat.
Thank you. All right, so just our last question is, with the rapid changes and advancements of AI, how can we set it up so that systems can respond accordingly? And have you seen this done before?
I guess I can talk a little bit about it. So how can we set it up so that systems can respond accordingly? Um, I mean, AI is ever changing. It's ever being used, internally, externally, fraudsters, the good, the bad. Um, and I think a lot of people think of AI as like this new thing, but really we've been using AI for, I think the AI or large language models have started in the 60s. Um, And we've been using AI, pretty much all of us, most of our lives, not really knowing. I know a lot of agencies, organizations, governments, whoever, will have their own versions, of AI internally, and then we have like Chat GPT and like these big, deep fake things. I think it's we need to leverage what is out there. A lot of people are very, whether you are with or like for or against AI, it is here, so we need to know about it. I think it's a lot just being aware of what is there or the possibilities of it. It's changing all the time. Not trusting everything that you see or that you hear, and that's been mentioned before. So maybe not so much like an actual system, but I think we can all be our own little preventative when it comes to AI. Trying to stay informed.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn.
Oh, Julie, you can go first.
No, please.
Okay, thank you. I just will touch on a little bit of that as well, and I do want to say something that the response that I usually say when I get a question like this for other forms of tech. I think that there is a lot of focus on AI right now, but we still have to remember when we think about violence against women and girls or gender-based violence, that women and young girls are being murdered and face other forms of abuse and violence at a much higher rate than those that are experiencing or being harmed through AI. And so when we talk about systems, I think that we have to include all forms of gender-based violence or tech facilitated gender-based violence, whether it involves AI or not. Our systems really need to focus around accountability. So in terms of facilitated violence, abusive people decide to misuse technology or AI to cause serious harm. Yes, I think, it's very obvious that tech companies make AI available and there's not necessarily safeguards in place. But that can be said about other forms of tech. So what I mean is you can use a cell phone to call for help, or you can use it to send a threat on someone's life. You can use social media, right, to promote a great event like this, or you can misuse social media to post non-consensual, intimate images of someone. And I think the same can be said about AI. I use it all the time to translate emails that I get from organizations, especially French-speaking organizations. French is not my first language, and I need AI to be able to better support workers that are asking for help. But like I said, you can use it to create fake evidence as well. So we need those safeguards in place by companies, but legislation and have that legislation in place. And I think Julie or Lynn talked about that already. But we also need to hold the abusive folks accountable. And so we are having, Lauren, you said I could promote this. So we are, Women's Shelters Canada is hosting a virtual forum on tech facilitated gender-based violence, May 11th, 12th, and 13th. It is free. You'll be able to listen in both French and English. I'll put the link in the chat, but I invite folks who want to learn more to attend those workshops.
Great. Thank you. Julie, did you have anything else to add?
You articulated it, Rhiannon, so much better than I was going to. The idea that I think we limit our ability to make impactful statements when we talk about AI as this one big thing. Is AI good or bad? It's like saying, is the internet good or bad? Or those great examples that you were just giving, Rhiannon, like, is it good for someone to have a cell phone or not? Or social media? It's about the use case. Like, well, how is it being used in this situation? And so I find the conversations become a lot more helpful for everybody when we start to go through, well, let's talk, what are we talking about when we talk about AI? Like, as Lynn was saying, versions of it have been around for decades, that we just weren't necessarily using that term, but it is basically similar in a number of ways. So that was just going to be my point about as these discussions progress, I think we add a lot of value when we start to talk in terms of specific uses.
Great. Thanks, folks. That was a really good wrap up to this discussion. We do have one participant question. This was in response to when we were speaking about what steps someone could take in regards to having fraudulent activity occur involving their personal finances. So they asked kind of like what can police do, or does the responsibility lie on the creditors and the consumers?
I can start. I know that having especially if you know someone's opened something, in this, like in this particular example, let's say I'm assuming it's someone, opened a loan, has a loan or a credit card in your name, and you discover it, by looking at one of the credit bureaus. Um, I would say a police report will go a long way. It will help when you're trying to dispute and say, no, I was a victim of a fraud. I've reported it to the police, because obviously some people will say, oh, well, you can make a fake report. Well, that is a criminal offense. So, it's pretty rare that people go to police to say I was a victim of a fraud and that it is not true. So having that report really helps to dispute with wherever, the banking, financial institution, or wherever that was opened. And then that then can speed up or help when it then gets also to the credit bureaus. And I'll let Julie probably add on to that. But there is a role in there for police, certainly. There is also the whole side of the investigation, especially if this is in context of an abusive relationship or a survivor that is dealing with someone they know who have done this or suspect have done this. Then the police, I would say, should definitely get involved to at least report this and look into it.
I see that question through a couple of lenses. One is, and I wonder if maybe the person who asked the question was thinking along the lines of like, can the police do anything? Like, can they show up at a bank branch and say, close this account? It is clearly fraudulent. And although that's a little out of my area of expertise, I do feel fairly confident saying probably not. That's probably outside of the scope of what a police investigation would look like. So from that perspective, I think it's important to understand whatever the scenario is, and as we've been talking about, there's so many different variations, but who needs to be involved here? And I think the police and others that you report to can be very helpful in explaining, like, okay, what we have here is a situation where an account was opened in your name. So let's talk through what needs to happen. The institution which opened that account, they need to be involved. Their fraud department needs to be involved in order to get to the point where they agree this is not accurate. This is not an account that is legitimately yours. And then that gives you what you need, or they directly instruct the credit bureaus, this account needs to be removed from this person's credit report. So there's that angle of like needing to understand how do the pieces fit together in the system. And I'm not saying that pretending that it's necessarily easy or quick or straightforward. There are always going to be some nuances, but if somebody who is looking for assistance from law enforcement is expecting law enforcement to hold their hand and go with them to the bank and then call the credit bureaus, that's very unlikely to happen. So just being ready to ask questions and try to wrap your head around, like, okay, what does this particular situation involve? So we can get a sense of what the steps are that are needed. So that's the first part I wanted to say. And then the second part is that I mentioned that these free options to put on credit reports, like a fraud warning or an identity alert, are available for free to everyone across Canada. There was a time when there were only the fraud versions, and people would be asked, do you have a police report number? Or do you have, were you contacted by your bank, for example, to tell you that you definitely were a victim of identity theft? And sometimes those questions are still asked in order to help make sure the request gets appropriately categorized, but don't interpret that question being asked as meaning if you don't have a police number, if you don't have a file or a claim number, then there's absolutely nothing we can do. That is not the case. There are a lot of proactive things that can happen. Sometimes that question is being asked by, for example, a call center agent just to help them decide, is it a fraud warning or an identity alert? And they literally look the same on a credit report. It's a bit of a legacy also from, I mentioned earlier, different provinces having different rules. There's a bit of different legislation out there. Um, so I just want people to feel like it's okay to call and ask questions or look online, um, even if you don't have a report. And maybe what you'll be told is, okay, in this case, we do need a report number for these reasons. And then you know what the next step is. But it's not necessarily an absolute requirement.
I I will, yeah, that's awesome. I will add to that, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, you can make a report online, and it is a recognized police reporting center. So for some reason, if local police is not an option, or whatever, um, that is also a reporting center. You do get a report number, um, resources, and we do. Although we don't investigate here, we have an operational support team. We do work with law enforcement that do fraud investigations. So sometimes we also partner with all financial, other private partner agencies to share these trends, what's going on, and sometimes it is a case by case basis. But yeah, at the end of the day, it depends on the type of fraud, who you get involved, but police can certainly be in there.
Great. Thanks, folks. So that is all the questions we have. I just wanted to thank our speakers. We really appreciate your insights and your expertise and sharing your thoughts. Yeah, it's your knowledge is amazing. I do want to just highlight that CCFWE and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre recently partnered and will be publishing two resources, one specific for survivors and then one specific for service providers, um, on economic abuse and the intersections with fraud. So those will be published early next week, and we'll send out an email to all the participants with the link directly to those resources. Narita will also be sharing a feedback survey. We kindly ask that you can respond to that so we know how to make these better and offer more of these with specific topics that folks are interested in. So thank you again for everyone coming out. We really appreciate it. This is important conversation. So have a great rest of your day. I don't have sunshine, but I hope you have sunshine wherever you are.
Thank
Take
you
care,
so much for
folks.
having me.
Thank
Bye,
you.
No
everybody.
problem. Thank you.
Bye.